Hello everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo, the channel where we have finally found a way to live. And for this episode, I'm hopping on a thread that I've seen. It's been going on for a couple of months now, and it's focused on records that changed my life. And everybody, well, most everybody is narrowing it down to 10 records that changed their life. And man, I'm 65 years old. There's no way I can narrow this down to just 10. There have been many experiences with records over my lifetime, going back to when I was a very small child, that really had a major impact on me in terms of my musical tastes and interests. So certainly the records I'm going to show have had a profound influence on my musical tastes and how I listen to music of all genres. So in that respect, they have perhaps changed my life. But I'm breaking this up into 2 episodes. And because, I'm way above the number 10. And this first episode, my youth, we're talking about early childhood and elementary years, and then junior high school, and then high school, the records that had an impact on me. Then in part 2, I will cover my college years, the post-college years right afterward, and then the later years, up to the present. Because like I say, I am continually finding music that is profoundly influencing me and the direction my musical taste and my collecting, has been going. So let's get started with early childhood in the elementary years. And my mother has had a tremendous influence on the development of my musical interests. And it began when I was very young, 4 or 5 years old. I remember she had this giant, it was called the Golden Treasury of Classical Music. And it was this, giant book with not just records in there, but there were like these big cards, and then there was some text, little stories about the compositions that were in there. And I used to listen to this all the time. But there was one single record that I went back and hunted for years and years later that I remember listening to, and it did have a major influence in driving me toward musical exploration, and at that time more into playing an instrument. And so I was maybe 5 or so years old, and I would listen to this record here. Okay, this is Peter and the Wolf, narrated by Peter Ustinov. Just an absolutely brilliant album. It's also got the Toy Symphony, Haydn's Toy Symphony. But yeah, Peter Ustinov narrating this delightful story, even very tense story. For my 5-year-old mind, I just thought it was remarkable how the different instruments were used to portray the different animal characters in the story. And that just really got me thinking about the possibilities of music and musical expression, so that I tried many instruments, in my elementary years and growing up, before I finally settled on the saxophone. But yeah, this is definitely an influential record for me, a profound record for me. It's on the Angel label with the foil. So my mother, yes, definitely a major influence. Now, later, as I got a little bit older, we're talking maybe 9 and 10 years old, I started to be influenced by the music that my older brothers and sisters were listening to. We had lots of 45s around the house, and my brother, who would have been in high school at that time, was collecting albums, and he even got one of those little, like, suitcase stereos to take with him to college when he started going to college. And one of the early records that he had that I listened to, and it just, again, very profound experience for me, was this particular Mothers of Invention album, absolutely free. So I didn't know anything about Freak Out at the time. This was my first listen to Frank Zappa. And again, it's on the, this is an OG on the Blue Verve label. And I had the repress also. But this was a record that there was something going on. And, at 9, 10 years old, I wasn't exactly sure what was going on, especially with a song like Brown Shoes Don't Make It. But I nonetheless just found the music and the storytelling absolutely remarkable. I knew what was going on in terms of, the concept of plastic people and the call any vegetable. It took me a while to, really grasp what that song was about. Initially, I thought it was about drugs, but it really isn't. And then, the other songs on there, I knew there was something wicked, naughty about Brown Shoes Don't Make It. But again, it wasn't until later that I was able to grasp what was going on. But the music part of it, in addition to the lyrical content, was just so remarkable to me. The way everything was just put together and the songs would go one into the other. It was just an amazing experience for me. So yes, the Mothers of Invention, absolutely free. Now back to my mother. She was a great record collector, although most of her, was very light listening and light orchestral pieces and things like that. But she only had one of these. I ended up getting both covers, the switched on Bach. I had the standing Bach and the seated Bach. This is by Wendy Carlos, who it says, on these records at the time that they were released, it was Walter Carlos. But this is Moog's synthesizer. And it was like the first time I had ever heard anything like that. And it was classical music. I knew this, well, it's not classical music really, it's Baroque music. And I was familiar with Bach, and I knew about many of Bach's pieces, and I enjoyed them. But this was so different. And it just really expanded my mind in terms of, even with quote-unquote old-fashioned music, there were lots of things you could do with it in its presentation. So yeah, the switched on Bach records were a definite influence on my musical development and my later musical interests. Now, of course, at this time, there was a big band at the time, They were on Ed Sullivan. They had an animated cartoon. Well, an animated cartoon. They had an animated TV show. And of course, we're talking about the Beatles. And this record is the first, it's the first one I really listened to. There were others later. So this is not, I was more blown away by the later records, beginning with Rubber Soul and, Sgt. Pepper's and Revolver, and those later records to me are far superior to this one. But this was my first experience with the Beatles, and that was this American release that was called Something New. And I remember, again, listening to this all the time, and the songs, Things We Said Today, Anytime at All, Slow Down, Matchbox, I'll Cry Instead, Tell Me Why, and I Love Her, I'm Just Happy to Dance with You. And of course, From Hard Day's Night, give me Komm gib mir deine Hand, Come Give Me Your Hand, which is the German version that they perform. So yeah, this was my real first exposure to the Beatles. And it did convert me into a Beatles fan for sure. Not my favorite by far. And in fact, I really don't listen to this very much. It's an old pressing, and it's not all that. It's a noisy record because it's old and it's been played a lot. But nonetheless, this is a very influential record and got me started into the Beatles and some other bands too at the time. Now, this next one really influenced me and got me thinking and wondering. And this is when I think I probably became enraptured by lyrics. And we're talking about Bob Dylan, and it's from this record, the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. And I'm really thinking about one song in particular, and that's Blowing in the Wind. I would sing it while I was walking to school because there was a music teacher in my elementary school who taught us how to sing the song, played it for us. It was, I believe it might have been on the radio, but the words, it's just all these questions that Dylan was posing in the song, but not providing any answers. It's just the answers blowing in the wind, with all these troubling questions without answers. Or the answers are there, but they're just really difficult to grasp. And for my, 9, 10, 11-year-old mind, this was really intriguing. It just had me thinking about this all the freaking time. We're talking 1963. So, I was 5 years old, but I didn't hear this record or the song anyway, Blowing in the Wind, until probably closer to 67 or 68 when, like I say, I was 9 or 10 years old. But yeah, that definitely had a profound impact on me. And then one just before I entered junior high school was this one that my brother picked up, King Crimson and the Court of the Crimson King. Now, the album cover is just like, wow, what is going on here? But then I listened, to his record, and again, this is 1969, I believe, so I'm 11 years old. It just, wow, just total blast coming at you with the opening song, 21st Century Schizoid Man. But then there's a lot of deep tracks on this record that are just incredible. One of them being I Talk to the Wind. I think that is still my favorite song on here. And then the song Epitaph just always, again, spoke to me about portentous possibilities, future events that were dark and foreboding. So yeah, we're talking, this is 1969. Vietnam War was all over the television news at night. There were protests. There was the world and the United States was in this major turmoil that I knew was going on around me. And I knew that there was this friction that was developing with the newer generation against the older generation. And it, being at the age I was observing this, it was at the same time really intriguing, but it was also very frightening to me to see what was going on. As, seeing not just the news reports that were happening, from in Vietnam, but from the 1968 conventions and what was happening with the various protests. It's it was a time that was difficult to navigate for a lot of people, and especially for someone, like me, who was just 11 years old. Well, then we come to junior high school, and there starts to be a little more focus coming to my musical likes and interests. And the records that were released in this period that really influenced me, this first one, I only have it on CD. I haven't managed to get it. Used to have it on vinyl, but I don't anymore. And that is this one, Tommy by The Who. Again, my brother had this record. And it was just, again, this a realization of the potential that popular music had, rock music had, in not just, presenting music that was great to listen to, but telling stories, and also relevant stories that you could identify with or relate to. Now, I do prefer Quadrophenia to Tommy, but that's just by degrees. But this was the record that really influenced me in that way, in terms of just realizing the absolute potential of well-crafted music, well-crafted rock music, that this wasn't just silly stuff that was on the AM radio, that there was some very meaningful work and stories of depth and interest. So yeah, this is and also different. The whole orchestration in this album, it's by a rock band, but it's not necessarily typical rock and roll music. It was just an amazing experience. Now, then came the next ones, and these are records that are not only special to me because of the musical content, but these were records that I listened to while I was getting high for the first time. So one of them was David Bowie, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust. When I first heard this record, it's very difficult for me to explain how I was reacting, because I was old enough, a young teenager, 13, 14 years old. And I say junior high school because where I was going to school at the time, we didn't have middle school. The high schools started at 10th grade, and then we had junior high school, which was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. But anyway, I was old enough to know about me in my own sexuality, that I was different from, well, at that time, I figured all of my peers. I didn't think anybody was like me. I had nobody to look at that would help guide me in any kind of way. So listening to this music, it did allow me, at least on an intellectual and mental level, an escape, a method of expression, because of the ambiguity of the persona with Ziggy Stardust that David Bowie was presenting. It's really kind of ironic, because the boy at the time who turned me on to this and the next couple of records, who not only was the boy who got me high for the first time, but he grew up to be just a bootlicking fascist. It just blows my mind how people that I grew up with who listened to this music became the people that they are today. It's like I am constantly overwhelmed by that. It's like, weren't you paying attention? Didn't you learn anything? But anyway, the other record at that time that made a huge impact is this one. I mean, come on, Dark Side of the Moon. Interesting. I don't listen to this much anymore. At the time, though, I was listening to it a lot. Again, this was a record that seemed to have this seamless thread, this seamless theme going all the way through. Plus, the production and recording that went into this record was unlike anything I had heard before. But as I say, I mean, I've got a fairly large Pink Floyd collection, but I seldom listen to this anymore. I listen with greater frequency to earlier Pink Floyd records, and among the later ones, I have a preference for Wish You Were Here. But nonetheless, this was a profound influence, and not just my own listening, but also the directions that I would eventually go into in terms of seeking out other music. And then another one at that same time that I was turned on to by that same boy is this Lou Reed's Transformer. So again, you know, me being a closeted 13, 14-year-old, listening to an album like this, especially with Walk on the Wild Side and Perfect Day, Satellite of Love. I mean, just all of them are such good songs, but especially Walk on the Wild Side. You know, I was so naive at that time because I was so deeply closeted and so much in denial about my own personal identity that I really, for many years in junior high school and high school, I was the type of person, I was a people pleaser because I hated the idea of someone not liking me. So I would do whatever I could to be accepted by many different groups of people. And I was very successful at that. I was able to hang out with the rednecks, with the jocks, with the stoners, with the nerds. I mean, I got along with everybody. I could relate to them. But that was mostly, which was a good skill to have, you know, and develop into adulthood. But it was a coping mechanism for me so that I could avoid dealing with me. And this is a record that really, again, this was one of those moments where it kind of forced me to think about me, and it was a safe way to do that. And because again, you know, I didn't have any mentors or any role models to work with. I mean, what's it's kind of ironic because my dad really liked shows like Bewitched. You know, you got Paul Lynde in there, and Charles Nelson Riley playing characters in there. And yeah, I find it in later years, you know, thinking about the shows that he loved Flip Wilson, and when Flip Wilson would do his cross-dressing, you know, it kind of makes me wonder sometimes about my dad, or, you know, because you know, he could have had an affinity, let's say, for homosexuals, but at the same time, it could have just been the normal straight reaction that of entertainers, you know, not taking them serious because they're not really equal with me kind of attitude. The same way white people related to minstrels, you know, that, hey, they were great entertainment, but, you know, I'll be damned if I'm going to move in next door to a black person or have one move in next door to me kind of situation. So, yeah, it was, but I always found that interesting. Three's Company, that was another show he really loved. So anyway, moving on, another one for junior high school, and this is probably the first time that I was really struck by a female artist. There were previous female artists, you know, that I'd been listening to, Diana Ross, and many others, the Marvelettes. I remember them, but they didn't really make an impact on me. I liked them. They were part of that pop music and in the R&B and soul culture at the time. But someone who really did make an impact on me at that time was Carole King and this album, Tapestry. Again, this album fascinated me. The songs, the stories, her voice. Just a really strong voice that, it's like how Robert Fitton says he doesn't like adult female singers who try to sound like children or like squeaky voice. She's got a very mature voice, and she's a very mature songwriter at this time. I had no idea that she'd been writing music for so many years and continued to do so. I really haven't listened all that much to other releases by her, but this one did have a solid and profound impact on me. Again, it's kind of hard to explain, but I'm in junior high school listening to this. And as I heard it before, when I was older and I worked with kids who would be listening to music at the time, a lot of times what I would hear them say is, wow, this song really makes you think. And that's, for a 14-year-old, that was very cool to experience music that made you think. And then this last one, it's another Frank Zappa, it's Waka Jawaka. And the reason this has such a profound effect on me is, at the time, it was this was the flowing 80 years and a lot of comedy music and stuff like that, which, as a 13, 14-year-old, I was listening to. I was yucking it up with everybody listening to that music. But there were other Mother's albums at the time that I picked up, including at the time my favorite one, which is Burnt Weenie Sandwich. But this one, this is a solid top 10 album for me out of Zappa's catalog. Really opened me up to more to jazz. I knew about jazz and was familiar with some, the more popular jazz tunes that were perhaps being played at the time. But yeah, this one really, again, it just opened my ears and my mind to the possibilities of music. And this was also about the time I was really getting into my saxophone playing, with the school band and in other performances. And so, I was very interested in this. None of my friends, though, none of them liked this. They were so into the comedy music. They were like, well, there's no lyrics, man. Where's the comedy? So it was another turning point, I guess, in my life musically, recognizing, the limitations that some of my friends had in terms of their relating to music. We related to a lot of the same kind of music, but then there were these moments where they couldn't relate to something that I was relating to. And it disappointed me, but it also kind of makes you feel kind of special that you like something that other people don't. Well, then getting into high school, for the end of this particular episode, this will look like it's a Frank Zappa release, but it isn't really. It is a compilation that he put together with Warner Brothers, and it's on the Bizarre label. But it's a compilation of different musical artists that Zappa produced and worked with. And so what this record did is it opened me up to and made me aware of many, many other musicians, not the least of which, Alice Cooper, early Alice Cooper is on here, but Captain Beefheart, Wildman Fisher, Lord Buckley, Tim Buckley is on here, Jeff Simmons is on here, the GTOs. So He had another one too, which I've been unable to find. Or maybe it was on the Big Ball. I didn't pull out the Big Ball to look on there. But again, these compilations that Warner Brothers was distributing was great exposure for me to learn about bands like Pearls Before Swine, and others that I'd never heard of. So it was a great exposure, great experience for that. Now, for a long time, this was a favorite release, but it's not. I don't listen to this one all that much. But at the time of its release, Neil Young Harvest was a record of, again, for me, the stories, the songs were so intriguing, just drew me in to what was going on, unlike any other music was doing, at the time. Songs like Old Man and The Needle and the Damage Done. The song Words, to me, is just an absolutely brilliant song. And then Out on the Weekend, I just kind of related to the character on that song. See the lonely boy out on the weekend, trying to make it pay. I just can't relate to joy he tries to speak and can't begin to say. At that time in my life, it was like, fuck, he's singing about me. Okay. Now, another one at that time that it was, had a couple really big hits on there, of course, is this Joe Walsh album, The Smoker You Drink, The Player You Get. Rocky Mountain Way was just a huge song. Meadows was another really big song, getting some FM radio play. But the deep cuts on this album are what really made it for me. Because again, they're the stories. And they were common stories about closeness with family, and looking back, nostalgia to the days with family. And even maybe a little more so on Barnstorm, the album Barnstorm. But this was a record that really influenced me, and it's still a favorite to this day, although I really don't listen to it all that much anymore. Then we have, this was about the time that I was really starting to get into the Grateful Dead. I knew about and had listened to the Grateful Dead before, but I think the album that really hooked me in was actually this one, and that is the eponymous live album. This is just a great album. Side 4, to me, is almost a perfect side, with the medley in there of going down the road, feeling bad, but I also love the song Wharf Rat. This is a really amazing album. Not my favorite Grateful Dead album for sure, but this is the one that probably really got me wanting to go more deeply into their catalog and listen to a lot more of their records. And I started buying a lot more Grateful Dead records afterwards. And at this time also, there was a record that was opening me up to country music. Country music, I kind of poo-pooed and I was very dismissive of country music. There were some Johnny Cash. I'm a bigger Johnny Cash fan now, but at the time, Johnny Cash was, it was okay. And there were a couple songs on the radio that were kind of pop songs, but kind of country, like Patches, or even the song Indiana Wants Me. I liked those songs they were AM radio hits. But this record, Patsy Cline Greatest Hits, when I started listening to Patsy Cline, I was like, wow, okay. Her voice, the songs were short, very, direct, but it's, wow. she made me want to explore country music a little bit more. But I remain very ambivalent and even today, I'm very ambivalent about a lot of country music because it, especially when we start getting into the 90s, I think, it becomes very formulaic, and there's just not much to it. But again, I really appreciate what Patsy Cline had done, and songs that, that are simple, but I always want to sing along with them. And I had it on CD for a long time. I mean, of course, when I was in high school, there were no CDs, and I really didn't have any Patsy Cline on records at the time. I didn't get this until first I had the CD, which I got much later, but then and then this was gifted to me by Robert Fithen. But yeah, Patsy Cline is always going to be very special to me in terms of country music, more so probably than a lot of other country music, quote unquote, stars and even superstars. So that's part one, where I was going, the records that shifted me in different directions, the records that have left a lasting footprint on my musical soul. And there's just not one of them I could remove from that list. That's why I had to do it. I have to do two parts. This is already going on 37 minutes, which is damn long. And if you've made it this far, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for sticking with me. You can find me on Instagram as NewsDude76. That's NEWZDUDE76. I have a Facebook page called Kelvin Wazoo that I have not just my videos that I create here, but I have other music-related content that I post there, articles and other videos. Leave a comment in the down under, please. Share, were any of these records that I listed today ones that had a profound effect on you? Are there others that you would like to mention? Particularly if we're talking about these records are all pretty much before 1976, because then after that, that's when I go to college. But yeah, leave a comment in the down under. I like getting them. Thumbs up, please. It helps. I appreciate that. Of course, if you want to subscribe, you can. Don't have to. The thumbs up really works and does well for me. And as always, I ask you to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.